what brought about this interest and this understanding about the world is going to the shit because of social media, so to speak?
I'm actually quite optimistic about the future. Like I'm not a pessimistic person by nature. I actually think that we're experiencing like greater prosperity than ever before. The problems that we're complaining about are nothing compared to the problems that previous generations have had. Really, like we're doing great. Like poverty is at an all-time low. We're freaking like thinking about going to Mars. Like we've got some of the greatest tools in the world. We're literally connecting with, like, you name it, and any race on the planet can like be a friend with one another. Try doing that back in like, the 1200s or the 1300s or during the Great Crusades or whatever. Like, good luck, right? The situation that we're in is great. So don't get me wrong. I'm super optimistic about where we're heading. But for me, it came back to that whole COVID point in time for me. When I kind of plugged out of my daily routine because I just had a little bit more time to kind of sit and think and observe, I noticed that so much of what is being fed to us is just a whole heap of shit from multiple different angles, from like people with different agendas. And it kind of made me realize, hey, like the whole news cycle is full of shit. Like you associate yourself with a certain tribe, and your tribe is like full of shit. And there seems to be like it's almost as if we're going back to like a tribal warfare system, So
And
I feel that that's an incredibly dangerous place to be. When we reach the point where I belong to this caste, or I belong to this tribe, or I belong to this group of people, and other people are completely wrong, and whatever they say is effectively violence, then how do you negotiate and compromise with those people? Like, you don't. What do you do at that point? You fight, and I think that's the biggest risk, and that is what will set us back, if anything.
yeah, no, yeah, great distinction, right? I think people living nowadays, obviously, let's be honest too, right? Where this can also be a luxury belief. I read about that term in a sense of here's you and I, we're on Zoom. We don't really know what someone who's living in poverty is like. What I'm trying to say is that maybe how news is presented needs to be changed. Now, the reason why I say that is that, as you know, everything is all subscription revenue, right? Now, if you got a publication, let's just call it Publication X. You need to pay Publication X $15 a month to access its content, right? Now, by nature, that business model means that you need to constantly churn out articles to keep that person in, right? So needless to say that the dollar motive is the reason why you're constantly churning out material, right? Now, I'm sure you agree, as you pointed out, there's a lot of shit out there, right? But a lot of it is being generated to generate clicks. And we're generating clicks because it's all about the money. So maybe, do you think that we need to convert the news into more of a public good that only reports on things which actually need to be reported on?
I actually think that media has especially news media has shied away from being just about the money, in my opinion. I think news media is more about the narrative. I think it's not so much about them generating the click per se, as it is about them pushing a certain narrative and achieving some objective for some other organization that would benefit from that objective being reached. Like, for example, I think it was the New York Times or something. Like Jeff Bezos acquired that.
Oh, Washington Post.
Washington Post. Sorry, yeah, that one. Yeah, Washington Post. Like, Jeff Bezos acquired that. Do you think the Washington Post is going to post anything bad about Jeff Bezos?
It should,
but it won't. And I haven't seen anything bad come about that, like, since that acquisition. And I mean, why would he acquire a company like that if it wasn't for PR and narrative purposes? I mean, traditional news media is not necessarily a booming business. I think we can both agree on that. So why is that taking place? I think it's not really a money thing, and actually put like
it's a mouthpiece.
It's kind of like a mouthpiece, yeah. It's a mouthpiece for different interest groups, whether that's incredibly wealthy individuals or organizations that have a broader agenda that can impact society. That's really its primary purpose at this point. It's not like profits.
It's power, influence.
Yeah, exactly. But like profits are great if they can make profits. If someone subscribes, then great, like they'll do it. But I think that it's not the primary reason. I mean, just look at CNN Plus. Like they lost $300 million like trying to do that, whatever that nonsense program they were trying to set up.
Is that some sort of streaming thing, or?
Yeah, some sort of like streaming thing that only like presented like woke kind of media or whatever. It was ridiculous. But I think that's its primary reason. And I was actually putting a lot of thought into this before, because I was kind of thinking about potentially having like a certain business idea that would fit in this space. Actually, I have a strong feeling that as we progress with technology moving forward from this point on, a lot of our key institutions, so things like social media, news networks, entertainment, things like that, are probably going to move to a more decentralized model in terms of the way that they operate. So okay. I was kind of thinking, wouldn't that be cool if you had a decentralized news outlet that didn't necessarily have an owner, that was basically pushed by community trust factor? So reporters would go out there, they'll scope out the news, they'll put it on that platform, and then the broader community would dictate what actually makes the headlines and what doesn't. So that would be an incentive to effectively get reporters to report on the news, for the broader community to effectively upvote what they are interested in with what they read, and then those people would effectively get paid some sort of digital currency depending on how high up their news articles go, depending on how much people flock to that kind of thing, right? So that way the reporter would be incentivized to not just accommodate to a certain tribe or to a certain narrative, to a certain mentality, but it'll be to report on something that has wide enough impact for a bunch of people to be interested in actually knowing about it. So that could be an interesting. Yeah, go on.
Isn't that a bit flawed, but because if you give an incentive to that writer to produce a piece that's going to achieve the greatest reach, isn't bias already baked in already from the outset?
Correct. Then you've got like things like clickbait and whatever, right? So there's a whole heap of extra issues that need to be solved for that one. But I think that would at least help a little bit with the whole narrative component, because I think that would kind of disassociate the organization from the actual news, because that way you'd have effectively a platform that isn't really owned by anyone. So that way it doesn't have an interest group that's running it, right?
There's no sort of hidden puppet strings.
Yeah, you can kind of think of it like Reddit or whatever, right? But just think of Reddit, but without Reddit as a company in the back.
Got it.
It's just there, kind of thing.
Have you heard of Substack?
No, I haven't.
So I think a lot of people are doing that already. So they're essentially individual reporters, and they're basically creating their own media outlet, and they're reporting on their own news. I think an interesting piece I read recently was some woman in Europe who basically has a newsletter. She doesn't have to abide by any sort of company rule or whatnot. And she basically provides a scoop of how brands in the luxury segment, she reports on the luxury segment brands. Mm-hmm. And she has no affiliation with LVMH or those major luxury brands. She just does whatever she wants. Do you mean something like that, where that writer is not anchored by someone, or
something like that? But I would say, how do you kind of take that and apply it to a whole bunch of writers?